We are
Hi.
live.
Yeah. Good afternoon.
Hold on for a second. Yes.
Go ahead, Amit. It says we are live on YouTube.
Okay. Sure. Hi, everyone. Very good afternoon, and wish all the women present in the audience as well as in the panel very belated Happy Women's Day. Primarily, today we are going to discuss a very interesting topic: winning by positioning, by the eminent speakers and the product management professionals within the panel. It takes immense pleasure for me to introduce Kaustubh. Kaustubh, I have been touched in person also, and he is a great human being here present. Kaustubh is the founder of ProductSkills, which is a strategy and product management consulting firm. He has worked with more than hundreds of startups to address them concerns about the product management space. He is working with NASSCOM Deep Tech Club to give guidance on the product management side. He has as a professional journey. He was product head at Manthan and then worked in US for more than 15 years. And he has a patent on database and subscription management, basically technology there. On academic background, he is a prestigious alumni of IIT Bombay as well as Massachusetts Institute of Technology USA, and he is on a personal level passionate about marathon. He loves reading and would like to spend time with his family. It also welcome once again on this particular platform and look forward to an exciting session here. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you, Amit, for the kind introduction. And I think all about spending time with family. I think everybody's probably had their fill in the last couple of years. But great to be here. Thank you for the introduction, and thank you, NASSCOM ProductSkills, for the opportunity. I think we have an exciting lineup, and hopefully we'll add some twists as we go along, which should make the discussion interesting. Also, everybody in the audience, please type in your questions. I think between Amit, Prashant, and I, we will try to take up as many questions as we can as we go along. I think we have a packed set of questions, but we would certainly love to hear from you. So what I'm going to do is, I'll introduce our panelists, and along with their brief introduction, I will request them to tell us a little bit more about their journey in terms of the kinds of products they've worked on and the kinds of spaces they've operated in. And along with that, answer the question on, what is positioning means to them, right? So, for me, positioning has always meant, initially when I was a junior product manager, what do I say about the product, right? What do I tell? How do I differentiate? How many points I have and how many differentiators I talk about. Perhaps as I started growing older and losing more hair, I realized that it doesn't matter what I am saying as much, but what customers remember, the way they look at the product. What do they recall of what you are saying and positioning? That is possibly more important. So I will pause there, and we'll go over to Suparna Dev. She is head of products at SAP. I think she's had a long career at SAP. She shared with us, 10, 11 years. And she's worked on a variety of products, including conversational AI products. So we would love to hear from you, Suparna. Tell us a little bit about the kind of products you worked on, and do tell us what does product positioning mean to you?
Sure, thank you, Kaustav, and it's a pleasure to be here speaking to all of you. I have been actually with SAP for close to 17 years now, and have worked on various products, primarily ranging from technology to applications, services, on-premise, cloud services, and in various roles. I mean, starting with the developer to product manager, product owner, development manager in various forms. But predominantly, the main part of my career or the last 10 years have been in product management in various products. And the last one being on head of product in conversational AI, SAP Conversational AI, which was a NLP-based chatbot building platform. So, I mean, for me as a product manager, if you talk about what does product positioning means, it's primarily the linking pin between, a feature-rich product and its commercial success, right? So you can have a really good product, but if you haven't done the right target market segmentation, you haven't identified their problems and needs, and if you don't create a niche for your product in your customer's mind, you're not going to win the market. So product positioning, in other words, means all of these, as we say in marketing strategy, right? The STP process: segmentation and targeting and positioning. So first, find out your target market, and then position the product based on what exactly will address their needs. And this is how you really get into their brain and compel them to buy their product by telling them how your product is uniquely positioned to solve their problems, to achieve their goals. So essentially, it starts with identifying the who. So unless and until you have identified who are you going to target, the rest of the exercise is really useless. So start with who, and then identify what is important for him, and finally try to explain to him why your product is uniquely positioned to help him. So this is what, for me, is the essence of product positioning, creating the niche in your customer's mind.
Thank you for sharing that, Suparna. Welcome, Niranjan. Niranjan Umrane, he is the, I think, EVP of Product Management and Pre-Sales at iCertis. iCertis, of course, a very rapidly growing company. I think I would no longer call it a startup, since you've been around over 10 years now. And he's actually very interesting role, since he's working both on product management and pre-sales. So whatever messaging he provides, he has to actually make it work. So we would love to hear from you, Niranjan, on your experience and what product positioning means to you.
Thank you, Kaustav. Good afternoon to everyone. Appreciate you taking time out and participating in the session. Hopefully, this will be worth your time, hours time, so to say. Yes, I head product management and pre-sales at iCertis. Not a combination that you frequently run into. And as I tell all of my colleagues, I have no place to hide, because whatever I sell, I got to back it up and deliver it. Positioning, to me, I think you introduced it well. Suparna articulated it very well. Here's a little bit extending into some practicality of how it has played out in our experience over the last 10 years, from launching the product to becoming a category leader. And when we started, I was very inspired by what Salesforce did to the CRM market almost more than 20 years ago, to actually start off by bringing in SaaS to the whole world. And we're a software company, and kind of a lot of my examples would be from this space. So that's where we started. And as we all know, positioning is about what we do with the minds of our prospects. Correct. So in the iCertis world, we started 10 years ago with a cloud-based solution, and our positioning was an enterprise contract management platform in the cloud. And if you see, it's not about the product strength or anything like that, right? All we are trying to create a space in our client's mind that, oh, it's in the cloud. It's all the benefits of it come to it. I've always believed, when you cannot create a wave, ride one. And cloud wave was just beginning to really, really form a decade ago. The second thing to always remember is, sometimes it's not enough to position your product, particularly in emerging segments and markets. You have to influence opinions. And so dream big. And like, for example, we said contract management is the 5th system of record, as important as an ERP. We had a lot of people laugh at us 10 years ago. But why did we start saying that? We started saying that because we wanted to elevate the value and perception of this solution from for a department to for an enterprise. So, so I think that's my 2 bits, right? Beyond the product, I think these are some things that over a period of time we have, strategized around, deployed, and have seen fair amount of success, and we continue to innovate.
Very interesting, and thanks for sharing that, Niranjan. I appreciate you talking about how you positioned in the beginning versus how your positioning evolved, and also about sort of drawing attention, right? Like with your idea of the 5th system of record. In fact, we had one of the questions in the chat asking, how does product positioning differ based on early market to mainstream, right? And perhaps you are kind of getting there where contract management itself is becoming mainstream, but it certainly wasn't 10 years ago. And initially you said definitely want, maybe say something a little odd, which people may laugh at, but they'll still notice you. And the other very interesting advice you gave is ride the wave, right? Like if you are a startup, you don't have much marketing dollars. I think certainly you should ride the wave. I think it just helps, right? And a lot of startups are doing that. People are riding the crypto wave, people are riding the metaverse wave. I think you name it, and absolutely, I think that's great set of points there. Thank you. Next, we'll come to Balaji. Balaji heads product at Samsung. And when you say Samsung, that's a whole bunch of products out there. So please do tell us. I know before we started this, you shared that you worked in every kind of product: B2B, B2C, P2P, and a whole bunch of other abbreviations. So do tell us, what kinds of products you worked on and what do you work on currently, as well as your take on what's positioning. Thank you, Balaji. Go ahead.
Thanks, Kaustubh, and the pleasure to be here. Thanks, Prashant and team and NASSCOM for inviting us. So unlike most of you, right, one difference in my career, I was blessed to start as a product manager. I'm not written code, or rather, I've not been paid at work to write code. Neither do I have an MBA, right? So right after engineering, I joined as a product manager at Microsoft. I don't know why they gave me that role, but I think I fairly did okay because they were staying there for like about 8 years. Then Amazon, and then some startup Tris, some fund there, and then now at Samsung, right? So quickly about myself, and then about the product positioning. So let me do the product manager positioning first. So at Microsoft, right, like it's the foundation or the bedrock of product management. That's where product management was formed. There was a 6-page document spec written by the first product manager to introduce product management, and he presented it to Steve Ballmer, Bill Gates, etc. And that's how the product org was created. I'm sure the document should be available somewhere on the public domain also for us to search. I think all of us should just go and read that. I think I was working on Outlook email client, and we built the first cloud-based backup system way back like 15 years, and it was real fun to take it from zero to like $1 billion, like a little unicorn within a large company, right? A bunch of other things in Windows, in Office, etc. Then moved to Amazon. So Amazon was a different beast, right? It's the first internet company, truly internet company, right? Like you launch a feature and then like immediately you know the results. I mean, whether you're going to get a promotion or you're going to get fired, right? So it's completely outcome based driven. Another beautiful company. There are 14 leadership principles. You will fall in love with that, especially in product leadership. And then at Samsung right now, I head the product org in Samsung Bangalore. So Samsung is very large. Like we have offices in Delhi, Noida, all over the world, etc. So I run the product management organization here in Bangalore. So we do a wide range of things, including all these cool software that goes in the phone, Samsung phones on top of Android. And then there are some horizontal layers on where we work closely with Google. We also work on the TV software, TV ad platforms, the 5G network, the camera software, a lot of stuff that goes in there. Now, quickly to enough about me and company. So about product positioning. So one line about product positioning, right? I think Suparna and Niranjan nicely summarized it with details. So one line is like, what is the image that customers form in their minds about your product, right? That is in short product positioning. So 3 words to underline. One is what, second is the image, third is a customer. So who's a customer, right? Not all customers need to form the same image, right? So the customers who form the right image that you want are your market segment or customer segment. The image is, they have to overlap with your marketing story, or rather your marketing story or messaging has to go create that image in their minds, right? So let's move it from a MBA to a layman terms, right? I mean, how many of us at home say that hey, today let's eat noodles? None of us. Probably in a restaurant we would say that. We all say that, hey, let's have Maggie, right? How many of us say that, hey, we want to, the common example, right? Want to take a photocopy of this paper, right? And tell me any kind of a small shop anywhere in India that says photocopier, right? They all say Xerox, right? And that's amazing, brilliant examples of brilliant product positioning, right? It's right there on the head, and none of us would even try the other noodles, even if offered to us for free, right? Mostly, right? So that's the power of a great product and a great story being said and a great product positioning. So let me say that with as an intro. We'll dive deep more into it.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that, Balaji, and I appreciate you bringing up, positioning and sort of brand positioning, especially with some of these companies. For instance, Xerox. Of course, it was a category creator and a winner, and over time, it became synonymous with photocopy. And certainly in India, you would see the same with Maggi for noodles, perhaps Colgate for toothpaste, and a whole bunch others. So certainly you have that playing, which actually will sort of change course a little bit. Since you brought it up. But that's great for consumer product positioning, right? But I think many of us are working in B2B products, and it's unclear, what you say to whom. So how does somebody who's selling contract management solutions, somebody's selling conversational AI solutions, and somebody's selling to businesses. I mean, you can't really come up with 2-minute noodle or Xerox. So how do you actually go about coming up with positioning, and what do you say to whom, especially when you have so many people, different roles to deal with? So perhaps I'll start with you, Niranjan, on that question, since you have really a product which I mean, who's paying, who's buying, who's using is a whole hodgepodge. So why don't you share your perspective on how do you go about positioning a product like that?
Yeah, great question. And trust me, we're still finding the perfect answer. It continues to be a learning curve. It is not easy, particularly in the software world. In the B2B world, I must say, when you deal with a very horizontal category, you're trying to speak with all verticals, all personas, all segments from a SMB. So think about contract. Right? If there is a business, there is a contract. Nobody does a business without a contract. We don't work without a contract. We sign offer letters, right? So, and when you start up a business, you really want to, this is like the best TAM that one can imagine. Everything out there. So you can figure out the product. Right? We want a horizontal, flexible, can address any contracting need and so on and so forth. But now how do we speak to the legal persona who is very interested in risk compliance vis-a-vis a procurement head who's interested in performance, cost reduction, vis-a-vis a sales head which is looking for revenue, speed of sales, so on and so forth. So we kind of follow a layered model where one, we are a one product company. So focus is very important, right? So there's no, we do contract management for a living, and at a overall platform company level, right? We have a positioning, as I said earlier, right, that takes the space of, hey, we're the best in the enterprise. We elevate to be the fifth system of the record, which means we put ourselves right with the other system of records like an ERP. As soon as you start talking that, we have actually positioned ourselves in the category of SAP Oracle. We say, or a Salesforce on the CRM side. So we do that. Right? We say we are enterprise-wide, which means we isolate ourselves from all the procurement suites and the sales side suites, etc. Right? And the second level of positioning then we start doing is on value, right? Outcome. And that is very different for these different industries and personas. Okay, that is where you segment and you focus on what is driving in that particular segment. And a few tricks to that is one, and again, in context of contract management, it could be what are the triggers that are playing out in the market. And when you think contract management, you get all kinds of triggers, right? From COVID to the current geopolitical situation to anywhere, any disruption, the first thing you go to is your contract. Am I protected? Or what is my exposure? Or these two questions are only answered in a contract. So how do you play that up? Right? So take these, what could be the triggers? What are the value points? And go in and do the second level of very targeted positioning to these individual personas, right? Do not carpet bomb. Do not kind of throw a lot of information. It can get very, very, very confusing because a lot of people say a lot of things. And the last comment, Kaustubh, I would make is positioning. Unlike these great stories we always refer to, and Balaji quoted a few, and we can go on with the list. In the software world, it evolves. It never stays. If Salesforce continued to say the same thing they were saying 20 years back, they would have died 5 years ago.
Oh, excellent points, Niranjan. And I appreciate you talking about the layered messaging and actually looking at all your buyer and user personas. In fact, we had a question on that. Is which one do you target? And I think the answer is both. I mean, you can't skip anyone. Especially with complex B2B software, where multiple parties will, if not buying, will certainly influence the decision. And another big problem in B2B is perhaps they will buy it, but nobody will use it, right? So you need to be concerned about adoption and enabling that. And that's where also messaging will play a role. But great points on the idea that, we will have to keep talking about it and keep evolving. I will, before we go to the next question, I'd love to see if Suparna, you are in terms of, who does your messaging need to speak to, especially if it's multiple persona.
Maybe I can go in since I don't hear Balaji. So I would totally echo what Niranjan has mentioned. In B2B world, especially, the decision making is more rationally driven compared to if you look at the B2C world, where it's majorly, you can say, emotionally driven, how the consumers buy the products, and the attention span is short, the selling cycle is short. Whereas if you come to the B2B segment, primarily, the selling cycle is longer, and you have to really address a large bunch of people in that entire hierarchy to really get your products through. And that's where addressing the concerns of these different people who come into this selling cycle is important. And there you have to have very targeted value proposition for each one of these people who in the selling hierarchy who you are targeting. And there, I think it's very important because as I said, in B2B segment, it's more rationally driven. People are taking decisions on what is the cost versus benefit, what is the return on investments, and what am I getting at the end of it. So it's very important to look at when you are talking to the IT guy that you're addressing his concerns that, okay, if for the IT guy, what is important, that his processes are running smoothly and he doesn't have to think about security. Everything is out of the box, monitoring. You're taking care of the technical concerns. Whereas when you're coming to the CFO, you are telling him that you really don't have to, it's low on cost for you compared to a long term. Maybe initially there is some sort of an investment, but in the long term, if you see, considering the services, maintenance, everything, it's very low cost for you. So we really have to see in this whole selling cycle, who are the different, in this case, the customers who, for us, who are going to make the decision of the buying, what are their concerns and how do we address that and tailor the value proposition towards that particular persona. So that's quite important in B2B sector compared to where you have the B2C, where you have a large scale, consumers, and you can again target them with different kind of emotional messaging.
I think Suparna nicely talked about the various stakeholders, right? Like one of the best practice since this is a product managers forum, is to call out these stakeholders as various personas in your spec that you're writing, right? And let's say you're building a product to like a small feature. Always keep thinking about, hey, what's in it for the CFO? Because the CFO is just going to sign that check for you, right? But he's not going to be using the product on a day-to-day basis. And if 95% of your ideas, and I've seen this with a lot of junior product managers, they would be only solving it for the admin there, right? Who would be using the tool, or for an end user. But they are not the guys who are going to take the decision, right? Your sale is not going to happen because of them. So like Suparna was saying, like break it down into various personas and think about what is their problem and how we are solving it. And if you're a head of product, etc., ensure that everything that we ship, we are looking at this holistically and have a balance of. And we can't even ship like something that only pleases the CFO, right? It has to be a balance. Finally, the user has to be happy, the IT guy's security has to be happy, and the CFO also has to be happy. So balance it out. But proactively keep asking your product managers in your team, hey, what are we doing to please these various personas, not just one?
Great. Yeah. Thanks for sharing that. I think both of you, everybody's basically saying the same thing, talk to all the different users, take the time to understand it, and then start conveying to all those folks. And, we are getting a bunch of questions on B2B, B2C, brand positioning versus company. So Prashant, I'll request you to run the first poll in terms of all the people who are attending. To what extent are they working on business products versus consumer products, or, who are they selling to? So could you please run that? I think we'll just take 30-second pause while you run the poll. Go ahead, Prashant. You are running the other one, but never mind. Let's get this data in as well. What is the role of attendees? Perhaps this was something we should have run earlier. So I think while we are getting the poll results in, I think two of you work for companies, SAP and Samsung. I think most people would have heard of SAP and Samsung. If you're buying software, you would have surely heard of SAP. And perhaps if you're buying a phone or any consumer product, you would have certainly heard of Samsung. So now, with a strong brand like that, sort of two things happen. One is you don't need to tell them who you are as a company, perhaps. But when you have 50 products or 100 different products, what do you do with your own product? How do you make that stand out in the noise? Or do you simply ride the overall brand wave? So I will ask that question of Balaji first, and then we'll go to Super. What is your?
I think great question, Kaustav, right? Like being a big brand is a boon as well as a pain, right? Because I think there is so much effort that's been done by so many people in the past tens or sometimes even 100 years, right, to build a brand. And the appetite to fail with that brand name, etc., might be very low. I mean, let's take an example, right? Iridium, which was set up, I don't know, like 15, 20 years back as a geo satellite, etc., was one of the craziest. Like it was too early a project. Like probably it makes sense today with Starlink, etc., right? Now, it was not launched with its parent company's brand name, right? For the same reason. All companies do this, right? Now, how do you actually balance? But you can't take that kind of a general stance, then you're killing innovation in a large company. Being a small startup will just eat you up, right? So generally, what we do at Samsung is, thankfully, it's extremely cutthroat, right? Where we are even competing with ourselves. Like just a few days back, S22 was launched, right? I mean, already people are asking like, hey, how is it different from S21? What will S23 be, right? And or things like 5G is not even launched in India. We've actually worked and launched it in other countries like US, etc. A part of our team is already working on 6G, right? Now there is a huge delay about from innovation to launch. It is known everywhere. The point is, I want to cover is the timing of every product launch. Right? That's extremely important. Both the examples, right? The Iridium satellite today would be a huge success. It was too early, right? I can call out a few more examples, but the timing is extremely important. That's what I wanted to convey. The second thing is, and brands do a great job of it. Most brands do a great job of this time, managing this timing. And the second part is about innovating and failing gracefully. That's extremely important as a large brand. We have known about issues where processors have been taken back, phones have been taken back. Right? It's extremely hard when it's a hardware that you're dealing with. It has a bug. Whereas a software, which can just be like, either if it's even on your server or personal laptop or phone or on the cloud, it can just be like just updated as a hotfix. Right? The problems are much less. So most of these companies have actually built various gates for hardware problems, and you would see that these QA teams, right, or and even the execs, they would be extremely paranoid about innovations. But it's good to be paranoid. Like if I can quote the Intel CEO's book, right, it's good to be paranoid at that level because only the paranoid would survive, right? And it's not being like negative, but being paranoid. There's a huge difference. There's a big line there. Timing, be paranoid, but don't kill the innovation.
Very interesting. Thanks for sharing that, Balaji. Suparna, you want to weigh in on that? Advantages and disadvantages of being at SAP while you're displaying the SAP logo.
Yeah. I know. Yeah, we are very proud to be working at SAP. Definitely, there are advantages as well as disadvantages. So if you look at it, you already have the brand positioning, so you can already ride on that. But at the same time, what happens is when you have a brand positioning with that, always comes two things. Number one, an implicit expectation from the customers about what they're expecting about the product, which you need to really live up to. And number two, you have so much of legacy in your stack that when you want to ride a new wave or see a new trend and try to catch up to the trend, the amount of backward force that the legacy pulls you back is quite high. So you really need to be innovating and finding out ways how you can really steer yourself along with the legacy that you have. How do you bring your legacy to your, make it as an opportunity instead of holding you back, so that you can ride on the new trend and go on and win the market. For example, I mean, SAP has been known as a #1 on-premise ERP for many decades, right? But it won't remain the same. There have been many new players in the game who have come in and who have captured a significant part of the market. They're finding the gaps and they're trying to win the market. For us, it's very important that we also try to look at these changes that are happening in the market, like Niranjan also mentioned about the triggers. And then what we do is, how do we really change ourselves to live onto those trends, like the cloud trends? So we went ahead, I mean, we had to take a decision of whether we go organic or inorganic, whether we acquire. So we acquired companies in the cloud domain to have those DNAs. And then also see that how do we integrate those items together and come up with a solution for the small and mid-sized enterprises, because so long we were primarily looked upon as something for the large enterprises. Now, so how do we position ourselves in the small and mid-sized segments? So we had to really change. I mean, we had to leverage our brand positioning. At the same time, we had to see what do we do different for this small and mid-sized enterprise in order to do the product positioning of the products that we are targeting for this segment. So we had to have a different product offering for this segment compared to what we had in the other segments. So while we leverage, so in a nutshell, while we leverage the brand positioning, I think for every new product that we launch, we really have to look at the market segment that we are targeting, the new trends we are targeting, and work on the needs of that particular segment so that we can deliver something which meets those needs. And that essentially cannot be done all the time using the leveraging the brand positioning.
Great. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that, very detailed perspective. And you are right that there are advantages and disadvantages. I think we are past our halfway mark. I think we are going to try to amp it up now. And I think I want to start with one very interesting question from one of the people in the audience is, especially in a startup or perhaps even in a bigger company. And I'll start with you, Niranjan, since you've seen that evolution. When you're defining your brand positioning and messaging, who do you make happy? Do you try to make customers happy or your boss or CEO happy? Quick response. No thinking, quick response.
No, it's customers. Without a shade of doubt, it's a customers. And you know what? You have to be bold and you have to be edgy. Don't play it safe.
Oh, excellent point. Especially as a startup, when you're trying to carve out your positioning, you're trying to make yourself known. I think excellent advice. Can you really do that? Can you be edgy in SAP or Samsung? Or you have to play it safe because you have to go through 3 sets of reviews?
No, I think I misread that question. As the CEO of the partner company, since we are all talking about B2B, right? If it's a CEO of my company, that's a different answer. And I completely go with Niranjan. Yeah. So I completely go with Niranjan's point because, see, finally, even the CEO of your company is not talking to all the customers in the world. So if you really have the data that customers want something else, be bold, stand with it. And even if there is pushback, forget the CEO at any level, right? We can, with humbleness, we can just take that feedback and revisit our data. And come back. And if you really, really believe that the data shows something else, if the customers really want something else, trust me, you're right? So, and you'll be a hero. So don't miss out on the chance. And be politely, you can always in a nice way, you don't need to shout in a public forum. You can politely push your way in and get it done. And there are so many ideas like that, right? Like Amazon Prime is an example like that came up. Right, a bunch of Office products in Microsoft are like that. Many of the phones in Samsung are like that, right? Because the CEO is not always coming up with a great idea. It might be the last developer who has just joined, right? He might have a great idea, so we should definitely not kill it. Stand by it, be resilient, show a lot of data.
Very interesting. So I think Balaji is saying, in order to convince your bosses, throw data. Niranjan says, be bold. Suparna, what do you say? Be bold, hide, don't talk.
I think it's the reality. Even the CEO understands it's not his opinion which is going to make him survive, but it's what customer thinks is what going to make the company survive, right? That's the whole thing. So at the end of the day, I think if it's very, very important to understand the customer. And if you think that your CEO needs to be told that this is what the customer wants, it needs to be told. And in a company like SAP, it's very, very much encouraged that you open up. There are various channels where we can voice our opinions if we think that certain things are not going right and there should be changes. And there have been many products which have been shut down and many changes that have happened because of this open environment. But I think it's important to have this kind of an open environment in the office as well.
Yeah, no, thanks for weighing in on that. And, but perhaps, part of the the challenge in doing that is also what product managers face, right? I think the question is symptomatic or emblematic of that you always have to be convincing people, perhaps who hold higher positions than you or more importance or greater status within the company. And it, as much as it applies to pricing, it applies to roadmap, it also certainly applies to positioning. And continuously you are trying to convince, perhaps through persuasion, perhaps through data, perhaps through, like all of you mentioned, respecting and responding to what the customers are asking for. So I think this probably gets only harder, especially when you have somebody senior higher up suggesting messaging or positioning, and that doesn't really seem to resonate with the customers. But great question, thank you for that. So what I want to do is, we have about 20 minutes. We are going to do a short 3-4 question rapid fire, and then we will take more questions. So this is intentionally a surprise. There was no prep for it. You have, I'm going to ask the same question of everyone. You have 5 seconds to respond. No explanations required. Just, give your thought. Perhaps you can add one line if at all, but no longer explanations, right? So first one, I think easy one. And we'll go in the order I see. We'll go with Suparna, Niranjan, and Balaji. Is positioning an art or science?
It's both.
Okay. Niranjan?
Art.
Balaji?
Both.
Will AI replace product managers by 2030 or 2050?
No way.
Niranjan?
They'll not replace. AI will not replace anybody, by the way.
What do you think about it?
I think AI won't, I agree with Niranjan, it won't replace anyone. And we as product managers won't let it replace us, right? We need our jobs.
Good one.
I think that's a good response. Okay. Now, next one, we'll reverse the order, and you can't pick your own company. What's your favorite brand and why, Balaji?
Mine is actually, I can't pick my competitor here, so I'll actually pick Pepsi.
Sorry, you pick what?
Pepsi, the soda
Pepsi.
drink. Yeah.
Okay, Pepsi. Why?
2 things. I love it. I love the product.
Okay.
Second, I found all their advertisements very nice. I mean, they're good to watch rather than their competitor.
Okay. Niranjan, what's your favorite brand and why?
I'll just try and stay non-controversial here, but something that has been close to my heart is IBM, and for the sheer reason of its willingness and ability to reinvent itself. PCs is synonymous with IBM, and they're not in the PC business anymore. That takes courage. And I think positioning, winning is all about how you evolve.
Thank you. What about you, Suparna? What's your favorite brand and why?
Undoubtedly Apple. Primarily because I'm amazed at how they are targeting a very small niche market segment, and yet with their positioning of simplicity and experience, they are, if I look at the data published by Business Wire in Q4 2021, 22% of market share, which is even ahead of Samsung as the leading, they are now leading in smartphones category. So how they have just, they just targeted a niche market segment, and yet they have
less than 30-second response. Sorry to cut you there. So one last question on the rapid fire. All of us are perhaps guilty of this from time to time, is use of adjectives like world-class, leading, bleeding. What's your most hated adjective, Niranjan, when it comes to describing product features and capabilities?
Leader, leading and leader.
Leader. Okay. What about you, Suparna?
Usually we use integrated or intelligent because we're talking about end-to-end business processes.
What about you, Balaji? What do you hate? What adjective?
I actually hate all adjectives. I'm ex-Amazonian, so if you know the style, you don't say like we will build a great product. We will say like we will build a product that will move the blah API from 10 to 20%, right?
So what's your most hated adjective?
Hated, I think the leader. Yeah, that's the one I would also pick, right? And it's there everywhere.
For me, it's always been world class. I mean, who decides it's world class? Okay, great. So, I think we'll go back to a few questions. I think we have about 15 minutes left. And I'll request you to keep your responses brief. I think we have quite a few questions. I think I like this one from Archana. It says, in your positioning, do you respond to the competition or not? I mean, do you really take on your competition, and, answer may vary. And I think, Balaji earlier talked about Pepsi, right? So one of Pepsi's most successful campaign in India was nothing official about it when, Coke won the World Cup contract. So, a great question, do you take on the competition or not? Niranjan, what's your take?
Yeah, I think absolutely. Competitive analysis is an extremely critical component in positioning. So here's two parts to this answer, very briefly, right? When we are a startup, one of the very nice plays is look at the most successful player in your segment and see if you can perceptually be in the same positioning bracket and kickstart your business, right? But you've got to really understand what makes that player successful. That's number one. When you've now become a leader, like let's say I said, is we lead the category. So it's easier to be behind the pack, right? And chase somebody down. When you're ahead of the pack, you have a target on your back. At that stage, you do competitive analysis because they have all got in the same, right? They're copying you. So you're now becoming a also ran, right? Similar as what others are doing as well. And use that to reinvent and repivot the category. So I think there are two, and there's a lot of right in between. Of course, every release, everywhere, you've got to keep your eye on competition. That's a absolute critical to look at.
Suparna, Balaji, anyone of you wants to weigh in on that?
I think absolutely yes. And just ensure you have to keep a very close eye on what the competition is doing, but don't follow them blindly because in case they are in the wrong route, you might also be led there. So it's like the same question as your CEO, right? Like, have your own opinion. No need to follow anyone. At the same time, let's not be dumb to kind of blind out on the competition. Like, have a close watch on those. The outside world might think that these are all products in the same segment, but that's not always true, right? For example, as Samsung, right? Certain companies, like the customers, things that are our competitors are not actually, right? We don't. In fact, there are partners because each time when the so-called quote unquote competitor phone ships, our semiconductor business actually grows because our semiconductor chips are there. So we actually want them to grow, right? So it's a fine love-hate relationship that normal novice in the market will not understand. So it's extremely important to define who a competitor is and then absolutely have a close watch and respond if needed, like the Pepsi example you mentioned. But do it very carefully. Everything has to be thought through very well.
All right. Thanks, Balaji. Suparna, you want to share any thoughts on that? Do you take on the competition or not?
Of course. I mean, this is one of the primary components of product positioning, as they say that if you have competitors, you have to really uniquely position yourself, that how do you differentiate and why should they buy yours and not the competitors? So definitely.
Yeah, in fact, Niranjan, you referred to something which reminded me of, I think a couple of years ago, we had a NPC session in which Scott McNeely was there. I think he's the founder of Sun Microsystem.
Yeah.
So he said, and he was talking about the times when Sun was a startup. So he said, when you are a startup and nobody knows you, you can simply get attention by dissing your top competitors, right? So they dissed IBM's, IBM boxes are too slow. We are fast. That's it. Okay. And you automatically have gotten yourself in the line as IBM, right? When you are an unknown 10-person company working out of a garage. So absolutely, there were a lot of questions on startup and cutthroat competition and how do you stand out? So I thought of sharing that. And I think it's a great strategy, which is, put yourself in the line of the best people in that. So at a minimum, people are comparing them with you, right? And I think that's a great place to start for a startup, whether or not you are there, right? So hopefully, You actually try to build something, but it's, in today's world, it's quite possible to be, better than the competition at one small thing, right? Like whether it's like, some of the things you talked about earlier, Suparna, about the right segment, the right niche, or the right category, or perhaps a feature set or a capability. It's quite possible even for a startup to be, better or comparable. So certainly, I think that's a great point about how you could position as a startup. One more question I want to take is, around this whole idea of when you have a large brand, how do you carve out a small brand, right? I know, Balaji, you talked a little bit about that, how sometimes large companies will spin off brands, or they acquire and they will, sometimes put it under that brand, or, maybe give it a different name. So I'd love to hear from you there first. I mean, what do you do, right? Like, for instance, even you talked about this, like, you're bringing out one phone every year or every 9 months. So you have this challenge of defining, how 22 is better than 21, while 23 is 6 months down the corner. So what do you do there? I mean, is that sometimes perhaps too much information, too much messaging? Is anybody listening?
Yeah, I think a great question. And I love the example also you mentioned earlier about Sun, right? As a startup versus Sun as a large company. It's a very important example you brought. Coming back to your question, right? So we do two things, right? Like, one is not everything has to be marketed. That's the first point, right? For example, about 1.5 years back, we launched a little app store of our own, right? And we just call it Discover, right? And the marketing monies that we spend on it is zero, like literally zero. And from a market share perspective, globally, typically Google has a 99% market share on Android, right? And this little thing that we shipped as a small product, right? Of course, we shipped it only in India, right? Already has actually grabbed like close to 20 to 30% of the market share. Okay. Now, again, like how many times did our CEO or someone come in a big forum, or even me or a product manager talk about it? 0 times, right? So the point I'm trying to make is, like, not everything has to be positioned, right, in a public forum or advertised or be associated with the brand. But what we do is, like, we actually micro position it close to a user, where the user is searching for new apps, and make it happen, right? So that's an example of innovation that drove amazing results, but there was no ad on the TV running for it, right? I'll talk about another example. There are like hundreds of phones that we ship in the last 3-4 years, right? Like, there is M series, and there is a lot of phones that are geared towards women, a lot of phones geared towards like tier 2, tier 3 people. There are phones that have been actually cheap phones that have been built for like elderly people. I think there's a lot of personas we keep in mind when actually building a phone, right? Or privacy features that we build towards the Gen Z crowd, right? For example, in India, we have this habit of grabbing other one's phone, right? Like, what if you are having some sensitive data on it, like sensitive photos, etc., and you don't want the other person to, and you don't have enough time to kind of delete it or hide it, etc., right? So what we did was a simple feature to just double tap the power button, and magically the phone is put in a private mode. The entire phone, right? Your gallery, camera, messages, everything, right? And suddenly you look like a good gentleman, right? So so this feature was called All Z. It captured the attention of a lot of Gen Z people, right? Now, this feature, though the technical complexities was not that big, but we did market it big because we wanted our young crowd to be hearing about such features, right? And they responded extremely well. So net, innovations can be sold, or big outcomes can be achieved without positioning and marketing, or with the right positioning and marketing also. So it's a case-to-case basis. That's the answer.
No, I appreciate your point that, not every feature has to be marketed and messaged. I think, and that's tempting as a product manager sometimes, because, you've actually worked hard to build everything. how can you not be talking about it? So I appreciate that point. We have one more question from the audience. I'll give that, request Suparna to answer that, which is, what do you do if your prices are higher and you can't drop them? Perhaps this is something you can relate to a bit, is when your competition is much cheaper than you and lowering price is not an option. What do you do then?
Definitely. I mean, it's not really always about the price. I mean, if you look at it, even if if I take, I'm not taking SAP because then I'll be sounding biased, but SAP is always considered as one of the costliest. Even if you talk about the example of Apple that I gave you just now, so that is predominantly quite costly compared to the other budgeted versions. But does it mean that it doesn't have the market share? It does. So we have to find what is it that we are positioning the product for. What is your customer segment? So first of all, find out your customer target segment. And second of all, find out what you're going to address. Which needs of theirs are you going to address? What are your differentiating factors? And there, even if you are highly priced, people are willing to go for it. So now if I come back to SAP, even if SAP is highly priced, people are willing to go for it because they know it's stable, it is secure, they can trust it with millions and millions of records, and they know that if the services will be quite good, there will be a lot of consulting if anything goes wrong. So they know the whole experience that comes with the product is much better, and that's where elevates the return on investment. It's not only about the price that is attached to it, but it's about the product features, the price, the experience, and the services that you offer together as a bundle, which defines whether your product is attractive to your customer or not. So it's not necessarily always about the price.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. And since you brought up Apple and perhaps several other brands like that, sometimes they've been able to evoke a sense of status or aspiration, right? Which sometimes is hard to do for B2B products, but it does exist. So absolutely, I think that's a very interesting point, as well as the overall experience, right? So we'll go much more beyond the product. It's the return on investment, the reliability, the support ecosystem, consulting, all of that. So, I think great points. One of the other things I want to get to, I think we have 5-7 minutes to discuss, is I think there is a lot of talk of new product, innovation, disruption. I think every startup out there calls itself disruptive and so on and so forth. Now, how do you really stand out in the noise, right? And I think that seems to be an ongoing problem for all products. And perhaps as we get more and more connected and we have more and more social media apps, notification things, I think it becomes really hard to stand out. So I will go to you, Niranjan, just a short answer. I mean, what do you do to stand out? And does that change, over time?
Yeah. I firmly believe everything evolves over a period of time. We grow as a company, as a business, market changes, etc. But what do we do to stand out, right? Number one, it is important to be focused on who you're talking to. Correct? So what's interesting to them? It's not about us, it is about them. A lot of times, we have made a few as well. We tend to go talk, hey, how great we are and how fantastic and how cool we are, right? And I think don't tell a feature, tell a story. That because then the story is about them. Product features are usually about us. Number two is be very concise. People are there's a lot of clutter out there. So be very, very concise. And the third thing, which I always believe one should do is to always have some risk-taking ability. You got to be bold. You cannot say, I'm going to be safe and sound, and right. That's where the art comes in. You got to that is you cannot stand out without being a little bold and edgy.
Excellent points. I mean, be bold, take some risk, be concise, and make it about them, not about you. Thank you for that, Niranjan. Suparna, you want to weigh in on that? How do you stand out? Perhaps, I mean, that's the whole idea of positioning. You want to stand out, and how do you stand out in the clutter?
It's for me, it would be, I mean, coming from SAP and the way we work there, since already there is a history. It's always about how do you identify your core competency and how do you identify your differentiating factor so that you can leverage both and try to project it to your customers. So that is what is important. Doesn't matter how many years you have been in the industry, the rights of, I mean, the change is going to take you on and going to throw you off the first number one position if you are not continuously checking on your competencies and your differentiating factors and responding to these changes. So it's quite important to do this. Maybe I can just give a quick example there. I mean, initially, a couple of years back, we were thinking of positioning SAP as a technology, I mean, especially the cloud platform as a technology solution. But then we realized that if people, general purpose developers have to go for technology, they would rather go for the hyperscalers and not SAP. Then we had to repurpose our entire platform as an SAP business technology platform. We are mainly focusing on our applications and how do we make the install base use these applications in a seamless manner using the technology platform. So that's where it is important that you understand your strengths and you understand your differentiating factor and leverage those in these changing times.
All right, thank you. Balaji, you want to weigh in on that?
Yeah, I just want to add to Niranjan's point, right? In addition to being bold, make it a consistent affair of being bold multiple times. You will fail at it. It's okay to fail. We all have heard about the Edison story about failure 1,000 times, etc. But let's talk about two other examples, right? Like one is the Listerine mouthwash, right? Meaning, I don't know how many of you know, you should read up the history. It was originally started as a surgical antiseptic. And then it moved on to become like a floor cleaner. And then moved on to become a cure for one kind of a disease. And then they figured out in 1920s, etc., that like it's not working out. Let's dilute it, change, blah, 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 all of that. I'm not an expert at that. But now it's a world famous mouthwash, right? The other example, bubble wrap. Two engineers actually accidentally invented it, right? And they thought that it could be like a fantastic textured wallpaper. They tried selling it. Of course, no one bought it, like probably like a few people tried it out. And they said like, you know what, like this can be a great something for the greenhouse effect, right? To create like instead of those glasses there. And then like they kept at it, failing multiple times of product positioning. They had a product, they positioned it wrongly for a wrong use case to the wrong customer, right? And finally, thanks to IBM, they were selling boxes of electronics. And they said like, you know what, you can just put this and then you can safely ship it without damage. The rest is history, right? So you can build great products, but if you don't position them rightly to the right customers, you'll still be a failure. So that's very, very important, and keep trying.
All right, thank you. I think with that, we'll wrap up the Q&A. I think it was great speaking with all of you. Thank you for taking the time to share. Thank you to our audience for, a whole bunch of questions. I think there are tens of questions which remain unanswered. So I'll have Amit figure that out. But thank you, and it was all wonderful talking with you. I will hand it over to Amit for his kind of wrap-up remarks. Go ahead, Amit, please.
Yeah, thank you very much, Kaustubh. Thanks a lot for moderation. Unfortunately, moderator does not get chance to speak a lot on the topic. He has to ask the questions only. So sometime we will also listen to you in a detailed way. Thanks, Soparna. Thanks, Niranjan. Thanks, Balaji, for amazing insights in terms of we discussed B2B versus B2C. We talked about different personas. We talked about how we should either follow leaders in that particular category or creating a category itself by positioning that. In marketing, we always learn that the essence of marketing is segmentation, targeting, and positioning. And I think that's where the message is going, that you need to identify what is your target segment and then creating a positioning there in terms of how you want to move ahead as a company or a product in that perspective. I think great insights, and I would also like to thank everyone from the community here, because today during the sessions we crossed 1500 on our Slack channel community. We started a year back with a 0 number, and almost now, earlier we used to add 100 per month. Now we are reached to a 10 within 10 days we are crossing the 100 marks every 10 days. So right, and we are going to in terms of a community, this year we are planning to reach 20,000 numbers in the product management community across India. Look forward to get help from companies like SAP, ICTs, and Samsung here to bring entire product management community here and grow this community. Thanks a lot, Kaustubh, and thanks a lot to everyone. Thank you very much.
Thank you.